Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Engineering Quality, the podcast where we get real about testing, leadership, and the craft of building software that actually works. I'm one of your hosts, Royalee.
Hi all, I'm Veronika. I cannot wait to dig in because today we are having a conversation where we will be discussing the biggest questions we all face in quality and leadership.
Yes. So, hi everyone. I'm Ellie, and today we're joined by one of my dearest friends in software testing, Keith Klain. I met Keith many years ago when we both served as the director on the Association for Software Testing's board. Lots of fun stories there. Keith is someone that I really, really admire for his management skills, his clarity in communicating about quality and testing to executives, his ability to elevate the teams that he works with. So Keith is a speaker, a writer, a podcast host, and he's got over 25 years experience leading testings across the globe and in different industries. He's mentored testers who have gone on to become executives themselves. He's built testing organizations from scratch, and he is a tireless advocate for quality as a true business driver and a very strong ally for underrepresented voices in tech as well. So Keith, welcome. So excited to have you here.
Thank you very much, ladies. I'm happy to be here. I love your podcast and have been a fan for a while. So it's one of the better ones out there.
Thank you
That is
so
awesome.
much.
Thank you so much, Keith. So, before we dive in, right, to the meat of the matter today, we want to start with something a little bit light and fun. So, the question that we're going to kick things off with is, if you weren't in tech, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
Well, I've got teenagers, so probably sleeping would be high on the list. I've just sent one off to uni, so he's soft launched, and the other one is in sixth form. So that years of, I know you all have young kids, so that sleep debt you're going to pay off at some point is starting to hit me. But I'd yeah, I'd say probably something creative. Art, music, writing. I like the creative problem solving aspect of our job, kind of drawn to that. I don't have a tech degree, so I kind of came at this, from a side angle, as a lot of people do. Yeah, maybe music. It's a huge part of my life with my boys, and we listen to a lot of music. And somewhere, and I won't say, there's actually, I played upright bass in a jazz band for a while when I was in.
Now we have to find it.
So,
we have to find
but
it.
it's deep. There's nothing in public about it, but so. Yeah.
I was gonna say Googling right now, but nothing there.
You won't find it. It's wiped, but yeah. I'm also one of those people feel like when I'm done with this career, I don't ever want to look at a computer or even my phone. I like when I'm gonna drop this and walk off and never pick it up again. So
That is too funny.
So funny.
So, do you actually have a music background? I know you said you don't have a tech degree, so do you have a music background?
Yeah. So I always played in high school and through college, and was always in bands and stuff like that. So yeah, both my kids are very musical as well. My older son plays cello in an orchestra still, and so yeah, it's always was kind of a side hobby and fun for me. But I did play semi-professionally for a little while, but like I said, that's deep in the vault.
That's awesome.
Amazing. I wish we had time to go into that because I didn't know that side of you. So that's pretty awesome. So you mentioned just now that you don't have a tech degree. So let's dig into that a little bit. It's like, how did you actually get into testing, and what was that spark that made you think yeah, this is the craft I want to pursue?
So I coming out of university, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and some of these comments I'll make will probably date myself a little bit, but I actually started in options operations for a trading firm in Chicago, where I grew up around there, and that I've been always kind of interested in technology. That was I remember the first computer that they brought in, my dad brought home for us to learn, was a Commodore 64, which was early 80s tech, where you plugged it into the TV. And so I used the technology at that firm and just kind of I like doing that part of it, and kind of doing all the clearing through the trading systems there, and kind of was always kind of interested in technology. And then kind of moved jobs around a little bit. And my first real job that was focused on testing was I started working for a technology consulting firm in Chicago. It doesn't exist anymore. The company's been bought and sold times, but they actually had a software quality management practice with like the thick handbook of the SQM manual, and they had training. And again, I'm going to date myself again, that like, they were one of the pilot companies if you wanted to learn Windrunner. So you heard of Windrunner?
No, what is that?
You're really dating yourself here.
Yeah,
No, what is that?
that was like early 90s. It was a capture playback automation tool. You've heard of Mercury Interactive, that was bought by HP and then became Test Director and all that kind of stuff. That stuff's kind of all gone now.
That's where I started. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that the
So
beginnings of it?
Yes, that was like they had this test script language that was based on C, so you could they'd send you to some programming classes, and which I always found that part of it boring. The actual programming part, I can do it. I've learned some Java and stuff like that, but I've just always kind of found that aspect of it boring. And I think coming from the business more side to it, I find that more interesting. So then I did that for a while, and that was like my first real taste of like working in testing, which to me was always about the kind of the interface between the business and technology is what I always think about when you're in testing. You could, like your test strategy, I used to say, is like your contract with the business or your users. So it's like how you interface with people and your customers. That's what I always liked about it. And I'm always kind of a tinkerer. And then as you work and progress through the ranks, I was a management consultant. Then I would call myself a dyed-in-the-wool opportunist. They opened up a branch in the UK and said, who wants to go help start up this branch? So I said, I'd never even been out to the UK. So I said, I'll go.
Sign me up.
Sign me up. There's other funny stories about that. Some guy who grew up in Chicago dropping in London for the very first time. So, I just kind of worked my way around there. Started working at UBS. I got a job at UBS Investment Bank, leading their technology testing team in their equities division. Then I went back to New York and was working there for Citigroup during the whole '08 financial crisis, just around the corner from the stock exchange on the tail end of Wall Street when that was all going on. AIG, I remember we were watching them walk out with their shopping carts full of computers and chairs and things like that. And then I famously went to Barclays, moved out to Singapore, which was really that was probably one of the best jobs I ever had, was working for Barclays, running testing globally for the investment bank and wealth management. And that's where I brought in James and Michael from the RST folks to train the whole. I was working for an amazing managing director there named Julie Evans, who just said, look, you clearly know what you're doing here. Just get on with it. And as long as, you keep the business happy. So I had trained it was hundreds of people we put through RST, and was given a lot of leeway to do that. And then kind of kicked around some more consulting, worked with Fiserv when they bought out First Data. Worked on the integration there. And now I'm at KPMG UK, part of the quality engineering group here in financial services. So
whoa,
that is super
what a journey.
Yeah,
no.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay, I wanna come back a little bit. You mentioned RST, right? RST. What is that? What does it stand for?
So rapid software testing is a methodology that was built by James Bach and Michael Bolton. You guys have a little bell. They just published their book. So I can ring the bell every time.
I saw that.
Which you have a chapter on. We know.
I did write a chapter, and I'm not here to, push the book. But yes, I did write a chapter there about testing and how the business sees testing. So it's a method on how to approach testing and techniques on how to break it down and kind of rapidly get to a strategy and a plan. And I actually look at more. It's a lot about philosophy as well, of what I really like about testing, and what I think a lot of testers miss is what their role is in regards to risk management and finding important information quickly, as opposed to being functional confirmation bug hunters.
Exactly.
So I look at testing as a risk management function, which has been a little bit of a differentiator for me.
That's true. Testing is so much more than just like finding what is wrong, right? It's like anticipating what can go wrong and try to prevent it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the clearest ways that a tester can differentiate themselves in the market as well. If you can speak to your business about risk and things they care about, your value is going to instantly go up as opposed to somebody who's just looking at their job as running tests.
So true.
We actually getting a lot of good tips for the testers in the who are listening right now. This is amazing. Yeah, it's kind of like the way to reframe testing differently. How to show your business value.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I remember I had a conversation with you years ago, Keith, exactly about that. Just as I was, moving up and becoming a manager and a director at that point. And I remember you saying about the reframing as well. That we need to have an elevator pitch of what is if you bump into a CEO on the elevator. Do you know how to explain to them what you do and what the value of testing is, instead of just saying, I break software or I find bugs, or, because, often when I interview testers, I ask them like, what do you think is the core of what you do? And so often I hear the answer, I love breaking software. I break software. It's like, you do so much more than that, and I remember that was a very pivotal conversation I had. And you have a lot of experience talking to executives about this. What are some tips that you have for people like that are going to talk to a manager, a director, a CTO or C-level suite about the value that the testing has? What are your tips there?
Yeah, so I mean, I used to do this at. By the way, when Allie and I were working near each other in New York, I always called her the boss. She was clearly the boss of all those discussions. But I used to do this at Barclays, where we would do training, or I would just like do pair testing. We would just work with the testers. Is to say, I call it the critical defect test, right? So you would just say, pick somebody up and say, tell me the last critical defect you found and what would have happened to production or our business if it would have leaked out and hit a customer. And it's a thought, a lot of people don't think about what they're doing that way, but it's a really easy way to start reframing how you think about what you do. So if you can say, oh, well, I found X and it would have cost this, or the impact would have been Y, you instantly can explain that. So if you do ever get that opportunity to talk to somebody, you can say, one, you're thinking about your job differently in regards to impact, risk, all that's money. I tell people as well, another tip I give folks, particularly if you work for a publicly traded company, there's I can't remember what the exact form is that they have to submit to the SEC every year. I think it's a K8 or something like that, which basically breaks down all the risks and their portfolio risks and their business risks that they view to their forecast. And if you just read through those and start to go, like, how would I test for that? And tell people, listen to your investor calls for your company and listen to the questions that your CFO or your COO gets asked, and think of a way that you could test to help mitigate those risks. Again, it's just a thought experiment to start changing and reframing how you think about your job. Because that's like being able to explain that or start to think about that differently. Those are things that, like, again, that's why what we're supposed to be doing. And it's so few people do it, Allie, like what you're talking about, that it's such a differentiator. It's such an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
But thinking about defects, listening to your investor calls, trying to understand the business that you're in and the risks that they're exposed to and how you can help mitigate that, those are two of the biggest things you could do immediately.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm happy you shared that, Keith, because I feel like a lot of employees don't understand the importance of them actually listening on these investor calls, or how it can actually benefit them on a personal level. And that is like a direct way. Like, you listen, you hear the questions, and you see, in my day to day, how can I solve this issue? How can I prevent this issue? So that's awesome.
Yeah, because that's really what systems thinking is about. If you look at it beyond just from a technological perspective, the whole business and the ecosystem you live in and the industry you're in, that's also a part of systems thinking. And all the artifacts or output from testing should relate to that in some way. And particularly like another one is getting good at explaining how we tested something, because that that is again another differentiator, because you might agree your test strategy, you might have a test plan, but the business might not understand how you're actually going to test it, which could be not a valid way of verifying or testing what they need to find out. And then you get to the end and they go, why did you test it that way? That doesn't mean anything to us. And again, that's a big thing I talk about, aligning your test strategy to your business objectives. That's a linchpin in that, is being able to explain to people how you did something, how you tested something, and getting agreement to that up front, so that it doesn't bite you at the end where people are wondering, well, does this even matter? Because that's not exactly how we're going to use it, or we don't understand it.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's true. So we kind of like you said it very well, that testers stand on the intersection of business and technology, and we need to explain both ways. Like we need to speak both languages fluently to explain to being able to communicate with both sides. Talking about this, we know that you have mentored testers who have become manager, VPs, and one of them have become a CTO. So can you please share what are the leadership principles, in your opinion, have really made a difference for them?
Sure, and to the tie into that, to the last bit we were talking about, because it just popped in my head.
Yeah.
You're talking about that translating, technology. Another good resource for folks is this book called Rethinking Expertise by Harry Collins. Most people in testing know him from Tacit and Explicit Knowledge, but he's written about it. He's a head of sociology department at, I think, university in Bristol University, and he's kind of adjacent to the context-driven or testing community through the RST folks. But anyway, the point is that he wrote this book called Rethinking Expertise, which talks about thinking about expertise on a continuum, and being able to speak to people in the business it's being able to communicate in the language of an expertise without being an expert in it. So can you talk to people in sales trading without being a sales trader, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
And there's a lot of good stuff in there that testers need to get into those different trading zones of information about, I need to talk to a developer, I need to talk to a project manager, I need to talk to the business. So there's great stuff in there for somebody to pick up on. But to the point you're making about, the question specifically was about leadership principles and practices, because I think that ties into it, because the first one for me is like the ability to translate testing into risk management for your business. That is such a big differentiator. The part about how we tested things, the reporting that comes out, that being able to tell the testing story, as they say, about what no one cares about testing metrics. They might say they do, but they don't. I mean, I've worked in testing for 25 plus years, and I don't care about them. What I want to know is, tell me what happened. Like who do you, no one's ever made a decision that really mattered based off of test case
Number of
pass
bugs,
fail
number of test
ratios.
cases. No one knows.
No,
Yeah.
and no one knows what it means. I mean, it's like, okay, it's a number, so what? So what? What am I going to do with this number now?
Yeah.
Does it need to tell me something?
Exactly. No one, I mean, you put those numbers in front of people, and I used to, in my maybe not so nice years, like at UBS, I used to call them the coloring in boys. You know what I mean? It's like people who just produce these metric spreadsheets, and they used to, when I started at Barclays, this funny story. So the first thing I did is, well, they had a guy who was running the program out there in Singapore, and they were trying to move a big chunk of their business from Singapore to India. And so part of that was the guy who was running the whole delivery center in Singapore was ex-Motorola. So he was all manufacturing metrics and he used to produce all these, I kid you not, every week, huge sheets of paper and plaster them around the conference rooms of what your numbers were. And so when I started, yeah, it was terrible.
You
And
mean
they
like
were,
test case numbers?
oh my, but everything, project management, dev, he had metrics for everything, right? And so the testing ones were all the traditional crappy stuff that you think you'd see. And so when I started there, like I said, the woman who I was working for was like, dude, we trust you, get it done. So the first thing I did was like stop all the reporting into his program, which we had again, it's a funny offline story about the argument I had with him about it. So I got permission to stop these metrics reports, and every week he still printed a whole wall of testing with nothing on it. It was completely blank. But if you read it, it said this page left intentionally blank. So it was like, so there was nothing on it. So like, because no one cares about this stuff. Getting back to the point, the point of the story is that like nobody makes a decision off that. So being able to translate what comes out of testing and what they want to know, and what your business needs to make a decision, focus on that. That's a key principle for that. And the other, in terms of like your career development for people, it was just kind of this part two of the question you asked. My advice, having been this in a while, is like, companies come and go, right? How you act stays the same. So my three principles I work on with my teams are always honesty, integrity, and accountability. And that comes a lot to owning your own value proposition. If I've said for years that like if people don't value the information coming out of testing, you're doing it wrong. Because they should care a lot about what you're finding in testing. And if they don't, the first place I look is internally to the team. Are we not speaking their language? Do we not know who our stakeholders are? Are we given the wrong information? Are we not communicating it properly, or do we not understand the risks? Fix that problem first and be honest with yourself. If you're the problem, get that house in order first, then you can start, worrying about other parts of the business. But just focus on what testing is doing first and hold yourself accountable to that. That's one of the key principles that testers have a hard job. I'm telling you anything you don't know. It's like, there can be a lot of, that kind of curse of Cassandra, mentality of, I have the power of fortune telling, or I can see the future, but no one believes me, And so you can walk around, people think bug advocacy is about making it personal. And so they walk around with a chip on their shoulder. And I will tell my business all the time, look, if you don't want to listen to what I have to say, I will sleep tonight like I do every night, like a baby. It's like, I don't care if you test it or not. I just want you to know, here's what I see as objective truth, as close as we can get to it, and what I think the risks are. And those are the kind of key principles, holding myself accountable to them, and then making sure that my team lives up to them as well.
That's awesome. Like, I think that encompassed like so much as well, not just becoming a leader, but also being a truly effective quality leader. I think today we really need people, and when I say leader, again, I'm not talking about managers only.
No.
I'm talking about, you can be a leader without having the title, but people that can communicate that value of what we do. And because it's almost one of those things that, when it works well, no one talks about it, but then you find something in production. And I saw your post a couple of weeks ago, Keith, of the reminder saying, all this culture that we have in organizations, like, oh, who tested this? And why didn't we find this during testing?
Yep.
That culture of blame on testing and all of that. So I think, being able to explain where we sit within that, within the quality environment of the organization is really important. Our next question was going to be about, what makes a true effective quality leader today. And I think you've touched on that really well there. Do you think that a quality leader today, in the environment that we work on, is any different than what you've seen in the past? And has that changed?
Yes and no. I don't think like being the core principles that I've talked about, I have really changed. I think, technology moves really fast like this and then not so fast like this. It does like leaps, and so
Yes.
I feel like the kind of core principles for how to be a good leader haven't really changed. It's just kind of the context in some of the words you might have to, learn or reuse to apply them. But I think, it's I'm making it sound like it's easy and it's not. You know what I mean? It's hard to do. And part of it that makes it hard, I think, to lead in quality is this idea of objectivity. An objective view of the relative quality of a product is an obstacle to it going live and or producing something. And you can, if you're looking at yourself or your role as that kind of quality cop, or all your job is test cases and defects, you can find yourself in at odds with a project or a program. And that's why, right, it's like a lot of you feel like, oh well, the tester developer wall, or like I've never looked at it that way. But your role, it is super important, and probably the most important thing you can deliver to a project is that objectivity. And so many people, that's one thing I like about RST, is it teaches you how to do that through some skills and some models and things like that. But so many people think, testers particularly, that putting themselves in that position or providing that objectivity is a negative. It's
Right.
putting yourself between those things, and you're absolutely not. It's the most important thing they need you to do. But if you don't marry it with I'm not personally advocating for this. If you don't like me, I don't care. It's like, it's nothing to do with me. And I tell a lot of testers, if you want a friend, go buy a dog. You know what I mean? It's like you're not always going to be the most liked person on a project, but the way you do it is super important. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. And there's one thing that I've heard you say a lot, which it ties into that, which is like software testing is a team sport, right? So if
Mm,
the whole team understands that we're all playing together, it's not, tester versus dev or whatever, we're working together, then it's easier for them to accept that objectivity, right? And
hmm.
understand the necessity of it. And that is so true. But there are some organizations, right, like enterprise financial services, where there are these silos, and hierarchies are the norm. So what does that look like in practice, and how do you break those walls down?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have to caveat all this with coming from a loud, middle-aged, mediocre white dude who's 6'3". So it's like, there's some inherent, people listen to you more just by the nature of all that stuff. So we'll put all that to one side, and like how, and because I've worked in financial services my whole career, so I know exactly what you're talking about there. So to breaking down those barriers, the things that I would focus on is just what I talked about earlier, which is that kind of self-reflection. If your house isn't in order and you're trying to bridge a gap with someone, and you've just got things that you're not addressing, you're not even that they're perfect or fixed, but that you're not even acknowledging that, we've got stuff to work on ourselves, and I always lead with that. When I take over a team, or I start to build a team, or I do a lot of rescue projects right now. The first thing I do is dig into the test team. I'm not even worried about what anybody else is doing. Let's figure out how are we contributing to this problem. And once I feel like I understand that, so that self-reflection, it's very offsetting to people who are entrenched, who've dug in. When it's, I was telling my son the other day, lead with an apology. Do you know what I mean? It's like people aren't expecting it, and they're instantly receptive to it. You know what I mean? So just that level of self-reflection. The second part is you have to do the work and research. I mean, my process to take on new work drives me nuts. I have to read everything. I print documents still. Sorry, ESG folks, but I have to read it. I have to get into it. I want to see the meeting minutes, because then you see what's not there that should be there. because I'm sure most of the meeting minutes are horrible. I want to read the presentations, I just have to get to the bottom of what happened so that like, and I've taken flack over the years for saying this, but I'm going to say it again. You have to earn the right to have an opinion. You know, I mean, not all opinions are equal. You all have the right to express them and hold them, but they're not all of equal value. And I want to be someone who has said, oh, they've read the doc. They understand the technology. They've listened to me. And you have to do that level of work and that bridges a huge gap, you know, where if people don't feel like you've put in the work to understand them, it's really
listen.
hard. You're exactly right. We haven't even done the homework, you know. Another tip I give people for trying to bridge that gap, and particularly in enterprise tech, and it ties into one of the first things I do when I review a test team or any org, is I first thing I want to know is how are people comped, right? I want to know the comp structure. Don't even know what it is, but like people do what they're paid for or rewarded for, and that's either money, attention, promotion, whatever it might be. How are we rewarding behavior? Because I will either one, not be successful, or it will be severely limited if I am swimming upstream from the comp structure. So a lot of it is managing your own expectations around what I am and am not going to be able to get done here with this group of people in this context. So the tip that I give people is what I call goal alignment, you know, which is if I know that a developer is being rewarded by how much code they put out or how many releases they do a quarter, and I'm sitting here looking like I'm trying to slow all that down, you know what I mean? That person is never going to listen to a word I have to say, you know? So I want to make sure that they understand I'm trying to help them achieve their goals. I'm not running counter to that.
It's a
And that's
win-win.
absolutely.
I win, you win.
Percent. And again, it's these the little things of the mind shift of stuff that we do that goes a long way in my experience. Because if you understand, if people feel like you're trying to help them and or at least you're neutral, you know, that they're usually more receptive to stuff. And for me, the last thing as a leader of teams and testing teams, you know, I view kind of I was going to say resource management. I know people argue about like, I don't want to be called a resource, or people aren't resources.
It is what it is.
Yeah, they kind of are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is what it is.
I don't mind being a resource to people. I mean, I'm a big people person, but I do call them resources. So whatever. But
well,
like,
it's kind of like what they deliver, right? It's not the people themselves; it's the work that they deliver.
You're exactly. So for me, like looking after people's careers or like that part of it on my team, once I feel like we know what our problems are, we've done the work to have a seat at the table, you know, we're not running counter to the culture there, then I am like, and I have people who work for me, I'm a rabid defender of my team. And if we keep doing the right stuff, like, so, you know, protecting people from projects, I want to be that air cover where they don't want to mess with the test team because I'm coming in like the hammer of Thor here and we've done the work and I just want to provide that level of, because there's so much in enterprise tech and testing in general that's just noise. It gets in front of the signal. So my job is to try and like to remove as much of that as possible. And as long as we're doing the right stuff and focused, you know, we shouldn't have to fear the politics or other kind of crap that happens in as limited as much as possible.
What I'm hearing is that you're saying the most effective way to break silos is just like to make the team think that you're their friend, not like coming after them, kind of.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That you're there to help.
Absolutely. We're aligned together. You know what I mean? I mean, just again, we don't all have to get along, but we're pulling the rope in the same direction.
Yeah,
You
of
know
course.
what I mean?
Like
And
we
all
have
the
the same
individual
goal.
ones. Yes, absolutely.
It's been, I think, being listened to, and the people understand that you know where they are coming from as well, even if it's not like you said, I'm not here to be your friend, but I do know where you're coming from. I know that you're being rewarded for this. I know that this is what the company values, and we can do that and deliver that together and still deliver better quality software. But when I'm not trying to go against you, we all going the same direction. So that
See,
I
I should
love
have
that.
just said what you
Yeah.
said instead of that 10,
Yeah,
10
exactly.
minutes of blathering I just did. That was much more succinct.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, though. But I think the way that you put it, it just it threads that needle to make it super clear on
Yes.
that value alignment.
Yeah, great minds think alike.
Exactly. And I think that helps you as well.
Yes.
That you're not going to be viewed as someone who's, oh, these testers are always, in my way, or
Yes.
we got to get rid of them, or they take up too much time and they're slowing things down. You can't make that argument if we're all aligned and they understand how we're helping them achieve their goals. So I'm trying to cut some of those arguments off at the knees.
Yeah, and as you said, when the alignment happens and you've made your seat at the table, right? You have earned your respect. You don't have to be running them down to tell them do this or that. They're running you down to get your
Mm-hmm.
opinion. Like, what do you think
Absolutely.
would be a risk here? So that alignment definitely has to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit and address the
Okay.
elephant in the room.
Oh boy.
Guys, AI. We will talk about AI.
All right.
Right
Hang
now,
on.
yes. Right now, everyone is under pressure to do more, faster with AI. In your opinion, how do you see the role of testers evolving based on this new expectation? And how does quality leadership itself need to shift based on that?
It's obviously on everybody's mind right now, and I look at it this way. You know, every I put this out every time I hear somebody say testing is dead or gonna die or something like that. It's that Elmo gift where he's in the mud and they pull up his face with a stick and he's just been drowning the whole time. Like, really? This time I'm gonna be dead? It's it's just my view on it. So I think it will and won't have an impact. It's a tool to use. If there's so much confusing language in this. However, there's AI in a system. There's AI systems. There's using AI to test something. And then there's how do you test something that's got AI in it or utilizes some AI. Then there's all the different flavors of what they mean. Are they talking like natural language processing, neural nets, just run-of-the-mill machine language, algorithms that have been running for 30 years. We've been using machine learning. So getting to the kind of meat of what that is, most of what you hear these days is the kind of the generative AI piece of it. So that's the interesting stuff that people are using right now. I will say two pieces to that. One, it's a tool to be used just like anything else. So testers should 100% learn about it. You don't want to be the person who doesn't know anything about it. There's great resources on how to learn the terminology. Some of it is just renaming stuff, as technology loves to do. I always say you got to get your decoder ring on and figure out, how do I find my way into this, language wise, so I can start to understand it, of the maybe 6 basic concepts for, building systems, so there's that piece of it. But it's a tool that should be used, or is going to be used, and we should learn how to use it. And so testers shouldn't be afraid of it whatsoever. This idea that it's going to replace testers, God forbid anybody thinks they're going to have some, AI system write tests, execute them, automate them, fix them, find about. That's going to be a mess. And I don't think anybody's vendors are talking about that because it's a unicorn, but nobody who I'm talking to client wise even is talking about that. So the impact I see it mostly having is probably in the test engineering field. So all the quality engineers and test engineering folks, cover their ears right now, because that side to it. So, and I was just having this argument with somebody the other day. The ROI of test automation for the last 20 years has been a nonsense. We have spent tons of money on this stuff, with really relative value retrieved from it. Headcounts in testing have only gone up year after year after year. The realization of, oh, we're going to automate all these jobs away, all it did was shift it to test engineers or people who can write kind of, bad code and call themselves an automation engineer. So the argument I was having with somebody was, I guess, well, they've got this massive sunken cost investment in their automation framework. It's spaghetti code that's been written and maintained for the last 5 years. Nobody really knows what the coverage model looks like. They run it every night because they're afraid of what will happen if they don't run it. So say I could use some, AI-enabled test generator-onator, and I could just wipe that framework and rebuild it in an afternoon with all the instrumentation, rewrite it in Playwright, things, modular components, everything else. And there's the value proposition is I get all this extra stuff that would take me a mountain of time to do manually with somebody in there actually really writing it. Why wouldn't I make that trade? And that's the impact to me it will have on the test engineering world is if I can just spin up an automation framework that quickly, what do I need you for? So that's the thesis.
But still, someone would need to maintain it, right? Like look at the results afterwards. Is it like?
But if I spin it up every time, and I'm still this is the to me the fake narrative of a lot of automation these days. It still takes an army of people to maintain this stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? So like even today, I need people to review code, and if they leave, nobody knows what the thing did. It's like, I know I'm being slightly hyperbolic, but that's actually happens quite a bit. And if I could just run it again or build it again,
why not? Right?
Yeah.
It's gonna be interesting to see really where things end up for test engineers, because I understand completely what you're saying. I mean, I've seen cases where
I just sucked all the energy out of the room, didn't I?
No, but you're right. You're right, because we've seen, right, where even with maintenance, how often are people actually paying attention to the results, right? Like you've seen the same scripts run over and over every night. The same ones fail because they're not being maintained, and then they're ignored because we know those, we expect those to fail. So it's almost like a waste of time sometimes.
So here's the paradox with like a lot of automation right now. All I see is people trying to make their suites run green, right? Like, why the hell would you want to do that? And the reason they're wanting to run green is because they don't want to fail, the tests to fail because they're flaky. Why am I running it for then? I mean, I'd rather not run it and spend more money and energy on doing some exploratory testing than run a suite that I know is going to be green and I've intentionally built to run green every time it fails. What's the value of that? We're supposed to be testing it to find problems, and the information over time just goes down. The value of the information goes
and the
down.
value, exactly, because the information is what it's our product, right? So if we are running that with the purpose of making it green, not with the purpose of finding new information, then the value is not there. There is no value for the business, right? We're just doing that. It's just a show for, it's test automation theater that I like to call, right?
It's performative automation, yeah.
We are just doing it for ourselves. And again, to put out that amazing number, we ran 7,000 test cases last night. They're all green. So we must be ready to go to production then. So, yeah.
And then we have like an issue in production and everyone's just like, what did we do? I was like, oh, everything is green.
Exactly.
And it's just like, oh, why do we have an issue then? So,
and we're all living that life, right? That's not, I'm not making that up. That's every
really
day,
is. Yeah, I've been working with teams recently, and we've been advocating and working to have a minimum viable automation suite instead of how many test cases can we add to this suite until it's like a nonsense to us, right? It's like, no, let's look at the other way. What's the smallest number of test cases we can have in this suite that gives us enough signal for us, so it's less maintenance, so we know what's in there, instead of running 17,000 test cases every every night. Do we need all of those variations in there? Let's run 700 and make sure that we know what's in there, and that we know that we're going to get a good signal that if it fails, it's because something is broken, right? So it's the paradox, but in our industry, that people don't see that as a move forward. They're like, well, but now I'm doing less stuff, and it's like, no, now you have more time to do the important stuff. You don't need to spend 4 days a week maintaining an automation suite and testing, really doing real testing one day. You can maintain it for a few hours and spend the rest of your time doing the valuable work of a tester, which is exploratory testing, making sure that you are finding the business risks, the stuff that you can't automate, right?
Mm-hmm.
But again, the automation engineers that call themselves automation engineers with pride, is like, I don't want to do the manual side because of the manual. But again, I don't want to open that box of, that Pandora's box right now.
Yeah. See, and what we're seeing right here is, yet again, I'm like the blathering GP answer. I'm the training data, and then Allie's like has to summarize that perfectly what I just said. So, like, if people are listening to this, just cut out the part that I said, and then Allie summarized it perfectly.
I'm feeling terrible. It's almost like I'm doing women's planning here. That's like, I'm not trying to kind of explain what you say.
Yeah, like TLDR, by the
way. Yes, yeah, that's fantastic. But the other thing about the AI piece as well, and for those people watching this, I love how I'm talking about the death of test engineering, I'm becoming more looking like a Bond villain as the light goes down in the UK behind me, and it's getting darker and darker in the room. That I think people with those skills we were talking about earlier, so who understand testing, test design, risk, all that stuff. Again, it's a very complicated, interesting tool to use, but if you still can't translate any of that, so skilled testing is going to be incredibly important. And I've actually, a lot of the AI bros that I watch in the industry, a lot of them are like suddenly discovering, man, testing's really a human, it's like sociology, man. It's really a human oriented thing. Like, really, I'm glad, you've woke up after your 20-year slumber, but, it's like, yes, no kidding. Here's some books for you to read and pat them on the head. And, I just think it's like those guys who are the Silicon Valley guys who figured out what a bus was, and they were going to reinvent transport. They basically just described a bus, anyway. So I think that kind of leadership stuff is going to be important, in never goes out of style. As many ups and downs I've seen, I think there's special things about AI that'll be different this time. But those skills never go out of vogue. They're always marketable.
That's true. I want to add a little bit more to this, fire that we are just trying to start.
Okay.
Vibe coding. Vibe coding. Yeah, I mean, just there are so many people right now who have no idea how to code, and they are capable of going and generating some code right now. And then, they say, oh, okay, I will test it with AI, but they have no idea. They have no idea how to code. They have no idea how to test. So I think it's another potential emerging area, for testers with those skills that you mentioned, right? Just those fundamental skills, when this is where we can see human intervention for software going forward, potentially.
But God help us if all we're doing now is testing code that's been created through vibe coding, right?
Oh, dear God. I mean, you don't want to have a test buddy or whatever they're going to call it, next to you. Yeah. I mean, my view on the vibe coding thing is that, and this is going to sound very snobby or whatever, but I don't see any of that in enterprise. That's app culture to me. Enterprise technology is where your banking. So do you want somebody to vibe code your retail banking platform? I don't think so. You know what I mean? Anything that's going to butt up against the regulatory environment. That's the adults are building those big platforms. App culture. My Ring camera, can be vibe coded, I guess, but they're not. Exactly. No one is going to let your insurance platform or pension distribution be vibe coded. You know,
Can you
that again,
imagine?
that's technology pop culture.
Yeah.
Well, Keith, this has been so fantastic. We are so glad that you joined us today and that you shared so openly.
You sure about that?
We'll hopefully we'll get a lot of comments. We welcome the comments. We
I
welcome
bet.
we welcome it all. But before we let you go, we want to do like a fun rapid fire round. So nothing related to tech.
Oh
It's just
God.
five short
Okay.
questions to help our listeners get to know you a little bit better. So are you ready?
It's impossible to be unprepared. So go ahead.
All right. So the first one, teleportation or time travel?
Oh, time travel.
Okay. Writing or reading?
Oh, writing or reading? Oh, definitely writing.
Writing. Okay. Slack or email?
Email.
I'm with you.
That's old. That's because I'm old. I hate
Oh,
Slack.
Slack.
I
Slack
hate Slack.
too, all the
You know
way.
what? You know what I don't need is one more damn thing giving me a notification. I can't.
I agree.
Oh my God.
All right. So how about this one? Standing desk or sitting desk?
Sitting.
Hmm. And then the last one, shopping online or in store?
Neither. I was.
You are lucky.
I would say I probably would rather go in store, but you know, I don't like to do either.
Fair
Yeah.
That's not
enough.
my end of the business. So,
See.
Thank you for sharing it. It was fun. And
you're
before
welcome.
we wrap up, where can our listeners find more of your work, or like where can they keep learning from your insights, and like where they can follow you?
Well, if this wasn't enough, you can. There's. I'm on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. I also have my own blog, which is qualityremarks.com. I've got a YouTube channel and that's it. So I'm just a test bash. So I'm starting to do a little bit more events this year. I'll be in a few things, but if you want to find me, LinkedIn or my blog is the best way.
Perfect. Yeah. So, and we'll link everything in the show notes as well, so people can easily find, your blog, your podcast, and everything. Because we love your perspectives, and we want everyone else out there to easily access them too. So, Keith, thank you. It's been truly a pleasure having you in our podcast. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. It was a great time. I really appreciate you
Thank you,
having me
Keith.
on. It was
Thank you,
fun.
Keith.
It was great.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. So that's a wrap for today's episode. Wasn't that such a fun talk with Keith?
It was so
Wow.
much fun.
He gave us so much to chew on,
Yep.
we touched on testing as a team sport. Oh my gosh, his take on AI and test engineers. And what it really takes to grow leaders in quality. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely walking away from this one feeling inspired. He gave lots of good tips. I'm already thinking about how to put some of these insights into practice.
Yes, same here. Can't wait.
I totally agree. And if you enjoyed this episode as much as we did, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a quick review, and share it with a colleague or a friend who cares and loves testing as much as we do.
And we got more inspiring conversations and stories coming up this season. So you can follow Engineering Quality wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our website on engineeringqualitypodcast.com. That's engineeringqualitypodcast.com. Connect with us on LinkedIn and watch our conversations now on YouTube as well at Engineering Quality. Until next time, bye for now, everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.